All right, in this video, we're going to focus a little bit more on the cell and its organelles. We're going to focus specifically on eukaryotic cells that are plants and animals. Plant cells and animal cells, you can see a picture of a plant cell and animal cell here. Keep in mind, these are just generic pictures. Not all plant cells look like this, not all animal cells look like this, but we always give you a picture in a textbook of a general plant and animal cell so you understand the details. Plant cells are the eukaryotic cells of plants. And again, they're eukaryotic because they have a nucleus here that surrounds their DNA. And they're often rectangular or box shaped, but they could have some variety in their shapes as well. Animal cells, they are the eukaryotic cells of animals, like you, me, cats, dogs, etc. And they're often like spherical or circular. Plant cells and animal cells will have similarities and differences, and so we're going to go explore those in the next few set of slides. What we're going to do is we're going to start by exploring animal cells, and we're going to take a look at all the organelles that animal cells and plant cells have in common. And then closer to the end, we're going to take a look at just specifically some plant cells and things that they might have different from an animal cell. So for the first few, we're going to assume that what we talk about in animal cells, they'll do the same function in plant cells. But then once we get to plant cells, we're going to see that there's a few differences. There is another little video you can watch here to preview what I'm about to talk about. It's always good to get different perspectives and watch different videos, especially if you did not quite like a video you saw the first time. Seeing things from different point of views helps you understand a bit more. In grade 12 biology, if you decide to take that, you'll learn a lot more about the cell organelles. So this is a really good place to start and to see if you enjoy learning about cells in that respect. So we're going to go through a variety of slides, and the slides will have this general animal cell here. So this is the parts of an animal cell. We're going to take a look at the organelles. And you need to be able to label pictures of cells. So this picture is a good one to label, but there's other ones you have to know how to label too. So even though the cell pictures I give you might be a little bit different, have a little bit of a different shape, or a different color to it, or different shading, the general way the organelles look is very, very similar. So you have to become comfortable being able to identify organelles that look a little bit different and cells that look a bit different. So here we have an animal cell, and we're going to start off by identifying the nucleus. The nucleus is right here. It's this big organelle here in the animal cell. So the nucleus is often called the command center of the cell. It has a membrane. So this whole thing is the nucleus, and this outside part is the membrane. And on the inside, you're going to have DNA. So the nucleus is called the command center of the cell because it has all of the DNA of the cell, or most of the DNA of the cell. And that's what allows it to control all the cell's activities. So if a cell has to produce a certain protein or divide a certain way or have a certain shape, that all comes from the DNA, which is protected in the nucleus. You don't want to damage DNA because that could lead to diseases, and that could lead to the cells not functioning properly. So the nuclear membrane will protect it. The nucleus protects it. There's also a little part in here called the nucleolus. You can see a little dense region in there called the nucleolus. The nucleolus within the nucleus helps to make ribosomes that we'll learn about later on. So there's a nucleolus within the main nucleus. And you can see over here, we took out the nucleus and put it here. We zoomed in to take a look at it in more detail. You can see here, this is the nuclear membrane itself. This part here is a nucleolus. You'll see the word chromatin, which is another word for basically DNA. It's DNA wrapped around structures, okay? And then you'll also see little holes on the nucleus, on the nuclear membrane. Those little holes are called nuclear pores. It basically allows things to enter and leave the nucleus as long as they're safe and small enough to do so. And you'll learn more about that in grade 12 as well. So again, at the bottom, typically we'll just kind of take out the organelle that we take a look at, zoom in, and see a few more details of it. But these are the main things you should know about the nucleus, the nuclear membrane, and what it does. Next, we're going to go take a look at the mitochondrion. So this is the mitochondrion over here. It looks sometimes like a little jelly bean with little zigzag patterns in here. That's how you identify it typically. Mitochondrion would be if you're saying one, and mitochondria if it's plural. So if there's many mitochondria, you say mitochondria. If there's only one, you say mitochondrion. Keep in mind, cells contain more than just one organelle generally, except for the nucleus. Usually they only have one nucleus. But other organelles, you can have more than one. It's just we don't show you that in pictures. We show you just kind of one of each so you understand it. So the mitochondrion is called the powerhouse of the cell. It's responsible for cellular respiration. It helps you to basically extract or take out energy from your food. So when you eat your food will often contain energetic molecules like glucose, sugar. And so what happens is the sugar will react with oxygen that you take in, that you breathe in, and that oxygen will break down the sugar. And when it breaks down the sugar breaks up into carbon dioxide and water, and it releases energy that your cells and you can use to survive, to do what you need to do. So that's what the mitochondrion does. And this is a connection to chemistry, right? This is a chemical reaction, and it's written as a chemical equation here. And you might think to yourself that this looks similar to a chemical reaction we saw in grade 10 chemistry. You'll see there's a fuel and oxygen, and it makes CO2 and water, and it releases energy. So think for a minute about what type of reaction that was or is. That's right. If you said it was a complete combustion reaction, that's correct. Your body actually does complete combustion reactions. Now, you're not exploding because you're doing it in a controlled way with specific things called enzymes, and you learn more about that in grade 12 as well. But it's really neat that these chemical reactions happen in your body. That's a part of biochemistry. So again, powerhouse of the cell. This is usually what people remember. If you ask them years later after taking science, what do you remember from science? They'll say mitochondria, powerhouse of the cell. And you ask them, what does that mean? They go, I don't know. But you know what it means now. You know that it's the powerhouse because it allows you to get energy from your food by doing cellular respiration. So here we've zoomed in to take a look at the mitochondrion in a bit more detail. You don't have to know all these different parts, but you can see there's different membranes that a mitochondrion has. There's an outer membrane, an inner membrane, a space between the outer and inner membranes, a little liquidy part within the mitochondrion called the matrix. So there's different components to it, and you learn more about that in grade 12 as well. There's a whole unit where you study cellular respiration and you see how it happens within the mitochondrion. So it's like you can keep zooming in as much as you want, and the more you specialize in biology, you can zoom into different organelles and see what they do. Next, we're going to take a look at the ribosomes. So the ribosomes over here are usually represented as tiny dots. Sometimes in your pictures are represented over here by these ones here. So you'll see this is actually a string of tiny dots as well. That is sometimes also labeled as a ribosome. But for us, we're usually going to take a look at these tiny little dots in the cell. They're a lot more than just dots. Their main role is to make proteins for the cell. And a lot of times people think that proteins is just for bodybuilders and building muscle. And yes, while you do need protein to help build muscle, protein does basically everything in your body. Proteins are enzymes for your body to speed up chemical reactions. Proteins give structure to your nails, skin, and hair. Proteins actually give you your eye color. The way it usually works is the DNA has instructions for what your body needs to do. And the DNA will build the materials for your body to do that. And the materials, they're usually the proteins. So in a way, the DNA has instructions for building specific proteins to do everything in your body. It could be things like proteins that cells use to fight off disease. So the instructions will basically be copied, sent to the ribosomes. The ribosomes will read those instructions and build the proteins for your body to do what it needs to do. So ribosomes are super, super important. They help make proteins for the cell. Protein synthesis is the more fancy word for that. If you zoom in, this is a picture of a ribosome over here. So yes, it's depicted as a little dot here, but it actually looks like this. There's this upper ribosomal unit, a lower ribosomal unit, and here it's reading some instructions from the DNA to start building proteins that your body can use to do all the work it has to do. We're going to take a look at the jello-y part next, the cytoplasm. So the cytoplasm here is labeled as B. Basically, if you see a line pointing at nothing, it's pointing at the jello within the cell. And so it's basically a jelly substance that holds all the organelles, has nutrients and proteins dissolved in it. It allows the organelles to move around. So it's the filling of the cell. Without the filling, then the organelles could not really move around. Things could not move around and dissolve. The cell would basically just kind of collapse. Okay, so that's the jello. I remember when I was younger, when I was in grade 8, we actually had to build a cell model, and I made a plant cell, and I was so proud of it. I had my organelles swimming in the jello. We actually made jello in a big box, and I had my organelles sculpted out from Play-Doh and different materials, and I was waiting for the bus with my cell in hand, and I dropped something. And as I dropped something, I bent over to pick it up, and I remember someone at the bus stop saying, "No, don't do that," because I tilted the box and all the Jello fell and covered all the organelles and made a big mess. And I was very, very sad about that. So I'll never forget what cytoplasm is, thanks to that story of the Jello just spilling everywhere, and my cell was destroyed, unfortunately. If you zoom in here, you can see the Jello-y cytoplasm as well. Then we get to the endoplasmic reticulum. That's a bigger word, and you should always practice these words as we go through it. Endoplasmic reticulum, we sometimes call it the ER. So here's a nuclear membrane. Directly connected to the nuclear membrane, you have this channel of membranes here, and it goes here and extends further here. And so it's a membrane channel, and it basically helps to transport materials made within the cell. There's actually two parts of the ER. That's why you see these two arrows here. There's what's called a rough ER. It's the one kind of directly connected to the nucleus. The rough ER, it's hard to see, but there's little dots on it. And you might remember whenever you have these little dots on it, that's a ribosome. So the rough ER is called rough because the little dots make it look like it almost has a beard. The little dots are the ribosomes, and so the rough ER plays a big role in helping to make protein as well. So it's not the rough ER itself that makes protein, but the ribosomes on the rough ER that makes protein. And then if you go beyond here, you have more ER, but you'll notice there's no more dots on it, so it looks more smooth, and so we call that the smooth ER. And so there's no ribosomes on it, and it has a bit of a different role. It helps to make some protein, some hormones for your body, and also more membranes. So if you want to make more cell membrane that you'll see out here in a minute, or more membranes that are part of different organelles like mitochondrial membranes or this Golgi body membrane, that's made by the smooth ER. So the ER, we often call it the highway because it can transport things, and its big channels of membranes can be rough with ribosomes or smooth with no ribosomes. If it's rough with ribosomes, it helps to make proteins. If it's smooth with no ribosomes, it helps to make hormones and other membrane components. If you zoom in here, you can see the nuclear membranes here. Continuous to the nuclear membrane, you have the rough ER with the little ribosomes on it. And then connected to that, extended, you have the ER with no ribosomes, and that would be your smooth ER, smooth endoplasmic reticulum. Next, we're going to go to the Golgi body. The Golgi body is sometimes called the post office, and sometimes we say that it looks like a stack of pancakes. This is the Golgi body here, G for the Golgi body. And what it does is, let's say, for example, the DNA has instructions to make a protein. The DNA would send those instructions to a ribosome. So suppose that the ribosome on the rough ER gets the instructions. The ribosome on the rough ER would make the protein. And after the ribosome on the rough ER makes a protein, it's not fully done yet. The protein is kind of a precursor. It's almost ready. It's a prototype. Okay, so that protein that's not fully ready would then be transported to the Golgi body. And the Golgi body would do finishing touches on the protein. It would sort it, it would package it, modify it. It would basically put little signals and chemicals on it to say, hey, this protein has to be folded this way. I'll put a chemical on it to say where it needs to go. So it has to go to the cell next to me or to an organelle inside of me or wherever it is. But usually it might have to go out of the cell to a different organ. But that's the Golgi body that kind of puts the stamp on it all and tells you where that protein needs to go in the end, and then again does finishing touches, fold it properly, cut it here, cut it there, so the protein can actually do the job it's supposed to do, because it can only do its job if it's fully built the right way. And so that's what the Golgi body does. It's often called the post office because it gives you the final packaging and then sends off the protein to the final area that it needs to go. And that's called the Golgi body. But as you can see, the organelles work together, right? I just mentioned that the nucleus has the DNA, gives instructions to ribosomes within the rough ER, and the ribosomes make the proteins, and then the proteins are then sent to the Golgi body, and the Golgi body can then send it off through the membrane to go to some other cell. But the whole point that we just saw here is that these different organelles work together to make a protein that had some important function in the body. Here you can see the Golgi body. You can see it's made up of stacks of membranes like this. And you don't have to know all these different parts, but basically the protein might come in over here, go through these little membranes and be modified and packaged and sorted, and then finally you'll have it'll come out this side here and be sent to its final destination somewhere. Okay, so far we took a look at a bunch of internal organelles. Now we're going to take a look at the outer covering of this animal cell. The outer covering. The outer covering is called the cell membrane. So we're pointing just at the outside here. Now keep in mind, this is just half the cell. You'd actually have the outer covering covering the entire cell here. Okay, that's called the cell membrane. It's the division or the separation between the outside of the cell and the inside of the cell. It's a barrier. It basically decides what comes in and what goes out. The cell doesn't want everything to come in because it could be dangerous. It doesn't want everything to leave either. It only lets some things out and some things in. So the cell membrane's main job is to basically be selective in terms of what can go out, what can come in. It's also made up of what's called a bilayer. So it's two layers of this special molecule you'll learn about later on called a phospholipid. It's essentially just a little fat molecule. I'm going to draw it out here just to show you if I can do that. So it looks kind of like this. This would be the phospholipid head. And then there's two little tails. And so the cell membrane, if you zoomed in, and I think I have a zoomed in picture of it later, has a bunch of these phospholipids kind of stacked together like this. And then there's more on the other side like this. Phospholipid head and tail, two tails. And the tails have different shapes to them. I'm just drawing them very simplified right now. And it would go all the way around, and this is what it looks like. So if I zoomed in, this is a bilayer, this is one layer here, and this is another layer here. So it means two layers of these phospholipids that make up the membrane, which is really cool.